All right. Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee, Council Ordinance 24-0521, Ordinance of Estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2025. We are back for Baltimore City Fire Department, BCFD. Eric Costello, Councilman from the 11th District, Chair of the committee. To my left, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District, Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District, member of the committee. To my right, Councilwoman Felicia Porter, 10th District, Councilman Mark Conway, 4th District, Richard Krummerich. To my right, staff to the committee. We're also joined by members of the Mayor's Office and the Council President's Office. Chief Wallace, if you could introduce everyone from your senior team who's here to testify today, first and last name and position title, and then take it away for your presentation. How much time do you anticipate needing for the presentation?
We have approximately 15 or so slides, sir, so 20 minutes. I'm going to be brief.
Perfect. What? I don't know. Marguerite? Yeah. Wasn't that good anyway.
Thank you, Chairman Costello. Members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is James Wallace. I'm the Chief of the Baltimore City Fire Department. I have members of my command staff with me here today who are prepared to testify as well, in addition to my own. With me in the room today is Executive Assistant Chief Kensington White.
Pop your hands up when he calls. Thank you.
Assistant Chief of Operations, Chief Dante Stewart. Assistant Chief of Administration, Chief Thomas Tosh. Assistant Chief of EMS, Chief James Matt. Dr. Ben Lawner, our Medical Director. Deputy Chief Anissa Sawyer, EMS. Deputy Chief Timothy Cullen, also EMS. Our Fire Marshal, Chief Sean Eames. Deputy Chief, Acting Assistant Chief of Logistics, Chief Jason Goodwin. Deputy Chief of Training, Chief Laura Shiloh. Deputy Chief of Professional Services and Standards, Chief Kalila Yancey. Our amazing IT Director, Dr. Shante Hart. Our Director of 911, Director Tania Reddick. Our Battalion Chief of Fire Communications, Chief Cassandra Case. Acting Deputy Chief of Safety, Captain John Boblitz. My Chief of Staff, Chief Amy Beth Lazier. Our Legislative Liaison and Equity Coordinator, Ms. Kim Washington. Our Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Jim Fisher. Our fiscal supervisor, Mr. Edmund Good, my mistake. Captain Wayne Robinson from Fire Department Human Resources. And finally, our HR generalist, Ms. Cherie Lee. So just a brief opening statement in line with our mission statement. Our department is diverse and it's ever-evolving extension of the community. We are committed to providing excellent service to all those we serve in a professional and humanitarian way. We pledge to protect lives, property, and the environment through a safe, effective, and timely response. We are taking an ever-improving, innovative approach to providing emergency medical services, fire suppression, rescue operations, emergency communications and fire prevention, as well as community outreach and public education, and finally, many other services. Although we are a fire department, I would consider us to be an all hazards response agency, as was recently depicted during the Key Bridge incident. Publicly, I would also like to thank my department for their efforts, as well as all of our mutual aid allies and our city allies for their response during such a tragic incident. At this point, sir, I'm just going to jump right into the slides and presentation. Okay. So for our org chart, as shown just by service itself, so our services are aligned 600 through 615. We'll break those out one at a time as we move through. So Service 600 is our administration. It's our top executive leadership branch of the department. We directly support functions including budget and financial functions of the fire department. We manage our infrastructure in regards to IT, HR management, as well as our general administrative services ourselves. The goal is to maintain our overall continuity of the department for the purpose of guiding our agency as we provide services to the city of Baltimore. We develop and implement comprehensive approaches to emergency response, medical service delivery, cause determination, as well as fire prevention activities. Next slide. Service 602 is our fire suppression and emergency rescue service. This service protects the many residents and millions of visitors to the city of Baltimore every year, and we do so on a 24/7 basis. This includes our land suppression forces, as well as our marine units, our emergency medical services, emergency rescue, and our hazardous materials mitigation teams. We are an ISO 1 rated fire department, which is the highest rating a department can receive. And our department is built and functions in an all-hazard response fashion. Our goal is to continue to deliver high-quality fire suppression, specialized rescue, and hazardous materials response, again, to the residents and visitors of the city of Baltimore. Once again, we are a 24/7, 365-day-a-year operation. 608, Mr. Chair, we covered through in the Office of Emergency Management, so I'm going to move to 609. 609 is emergency medical services, and one that I believe the city should be very proud of. Again, 24/7 response. This service responds to over 180,000 calls a year. Their transport numbers are around 90,000 transports annually as a result of those 180,000 calls. Our goal is to reduce the overall response times to high priority calls with a focus on harm reduction. We include in this call response, EMS billing, quality assurance, staff training, and infection control. And I'd also like to highlight, they just recently implemented a Tele 911 program, which we're proud to say is the first in the state of Maryland. And it's one that we're very proud of. And right now, at least the initial data does indicate that we're moving in the right direction. I would also like to add that we implemented a drug called hydroxycobalamin. It's known on the market as a cyano kit. This is a measure that we've taken not only for the citizens of Baltimore, but for our firefighters. This particular drug is utilized during times of cyanide poisoning, which in fires, hydrogen cyanide is present. So if we had a firefighter down, they lost their mask, or civilians that we're rescuing from homes, this is an immediate countermeasure that we've taken on this year, and we believe this will help improve the survivability during times of structure fires. Service 610 is Fire and Community Outreach. This service provides outreach and education to the city's residents and businesses, specifically in regards to fire safety and prevention, as well as emergency medical services. We strive to empower residents to gain insight and also to interact, or allow them a pathway to interact with their fire department through apparatus displays, fire and life safety presentations, and other community events that we attend. We perform this, one specific one that we're very proud of is we conduct hands-only CPR. We also teach stroke awareness as well as stop the bleed. For this particular service, I'd like to highlight the fact that they've, just in this fiscal year to date, we've been at 284 events. They've touched what we call touch, they've engaged just over 29,000 people, and we have been able to train over 2,500 City of Baltimore residents in hands-only CPR. Service 611 is fire code enforcement. This service works closely with code enforcement teams across the city, including DHCD, to ensure that new commercial and residential construction within the city meets the established code. This includes testing of and approval of fire protection systems, as well as sprinkler systems, fire alarms. They also conduct reviews of architectural plans for life safety code compliance. Their goal is to reduce the likelihood of fires, ensuring that buildings meet safety regulations. Activities include conducting building inspections, plans reviews, fire safety equipment testing for over 5,800 multifamily dwellings, over 11,000 rental units, over 83,000 single-family dwellings, and approximately 13,500 commercial structures in the city of Baltimore. Year to date in this fiscal year, they've conducted just under 13,000 inspections. They've participated in over 100 fire safety talks and fire drills, and the Fire Marshal's office, which also lives under the Office of the Fire Marshal, has conducted over 490 cause determination investigations. Fire Investigation, Service 612. The service investigates and tracks the cause of fires to focus on prevention efforts, issue product recalls, and prosecute arson crimes. The goal of the service is to reduce the loss of life, injuries, and property resulting from fires. Our Fire Investigation Bureau determines whether a crime has occurred through conducting investigations into the origin and cause of fires. We then provide crucial information to law enforcement for criminal prosecution. And again, this year, they've investigated so far 490 structure fires, or fires. Service 613, Fire Facilities Maintenance and Replacement. This essentially is the infrastructure of the fire department. This service has all things capital, all of our buildings, as well as many of our operational components. They are responsible for maintaining and improving the department's building and equipment assets. Their goal in the service is to improve, maintain, and repair department's buildings and equipment assets and reduce overall response times to high priority calls with a focus on harm reduction. I would add that they're an extraordinarily busy group of people. They're going to get even more busy now with the ARPA funded projects. They're forever taking on building repair projects. This is also the service that is responsible for our apparatus. I would like to highlight their innovation this year. We're working on ordering and taking delivery of 9 fully electric vehicles. Service 614 is Fire Communications and Dispatch. This service processes approximately 1 million fire and EMS calls received through CAD. Communications dispatches approximately 349,000 calls for fire and EMS service annually. Their goal is to turn calls around, receive 911 calls, return them around, and initiate field response as quickly as possible. One project that they're very proud of, Director Reddit is in the room. We are now moving towards an ability to geofence either incidents or large events in the city and redirect 911 calls from those particular incidents into an alternate location so that we can relieve some of the call volume from the incident itself off the 911 center. Service 615 is fire and training education, another service that we're extraordinarily proud of. They essentially train all of our personnel. They act as the gateway into the fire department with the fire academy, but they also conduct ongoing professional development, ongoing skills review, and ongoing training improvement. And I'll just highlight a couple of things for them real quick. This year so far with total recruit training, they've exceeded over 4,400 hours of recruit training applied to approximately 152 recruits, and their field training hours that they've delivered are well over 2,300 hours. Finally, I would also like to highlight in our fire academy right now, we have 23 women cadets. It's the most we've ever had. So it just shows that our recruiting is working, and Chief Shallow and her team out there are doing an amazing job. Councilman, that's the end of my opening. I'll stop there for any questions.
Thank you very much, Vice President Conway. We're going to do 2 questions for fire. I'm going to ask members to please be succinct in asking your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief Wallace. Appreciate working with you. You've been amazing over the last year since you came on, and we were talking a little bit before this about the banner in the Times article that came out and how we're thinking about our operations, how we should be thinking about opiates and overdoses amongst folks in the streets. Oftentimes, you guys are our first responders. I'm curious, when we deal with these instances where folks have overdosed and we've administered naloxone, do we automatically transfer those folks to the hospital, or do we kind of send them on their way? And I'm curious, whatever that decision is, I don't know what it is, but why do we take that approach?
Yes, sir, and thank you. I'll start, and then I'll ask Chief Matz to speak as well. So every patient has a right to refuse, right? They have a legal right that they're able to refuse. Dispositions on those calls are either a transport or a refusal. Unfortunately, there are times where dispositions on those calls are, also the overdose itself has been fatal for the patient. But otherwise, when we engage in patients, they're administered Narcan, and if they respond to Narcan, at that point, I think most of them will allow transport, but they do have a legal right to refuse. But I'll ask Chief Matz to go a little deeper for you.
Yes, sir. We also do a program where we ask if they want some help and some outreach. If we do, unfortunately, the outreach can't keep up with the speed that we get on scene. What we'll do is we'll note that they want some outreach and where to get a hold of them, either a number or a location, and then we attempt to follow up with that. Mm-hmm. In addition to just doing our response piece, the fire department really does quite a bit. I mean, we do a lot of Narcan training and distribution, as I know we've shared many times. As of this week, it's actually at a date with some of these slides. We've actually distributed 16,000 doses or 8,000 kits, which is incredible. We're an example for the rest of the state with that. We're also assist with treatment in terms of taking people if they want to go to the stabilization center. Right now, we're in the infancy stages of offering buprenorphine if somebody wants to be induced. Problem with that is you have to be able to take them somewhere. So we're working that little piece out once we can induce them. As I said, we do a lot of the education. Our crews that are working to distribute a lot of the Narcan through our population health initiative, the state requires us to do an immense amount of public education along with that. I'm working off memory now. I think we did just over about 177 hours of public education. So they're doing quite a bit. And then we outreach, as I said, with people, encouraging people.
I appreciate that. And so essentially what I'm hearing is it depends on the person. We'll offer it every time, but it really depends on whether or not they want to take the transport.
Yes, sir.
Got it. The other question I have is how many of our, like what percentage, if you had to estimate, if you don't have it on hand, what percentage of our calls are tied to opioid use or some sort of drug use call, if we had to estimate?
Yeah, we track a lot of our, part of the problem with trying to track that call in specific is unless we administer Narcan and we actually see the reaction, right, in an unconscious person or even an altered mental status, we can't say for sure that that particular intervention was, or I'm sorry, let me back up, that conversion was a result of Narcan being applied to an opioid. So it gets very difficult in the field at the clinician level. Of course, in the hospital, right, there are more definitive ways to determine what's wrong with someone. Mm-hmm. We can pull down some data, I think, for you that'll show initial call versus final disposition in the field. That's probably about as close as we'll be able to get, but we're happy to do it.
That would be really helpful. What I'm trying to get to here is to understand how significant of a pull responses to overdoses are on our operations, or not even just overdoses, but generally opioids and their impact on people's behavior or anything that may happen that may result in a call to 911.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chief.
I pulled the data actually today.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that it averages, I can give you a per day.
Sure.
At the height in 2018, those numbers were in excess of 25 per day.
Okay.
Now, I just recently looked at it, it's running about 4 or 5 per day. But you gotta understand the way our reporting works, we're looking for people that definitively react to the administration of naloxone. So that number now runs about 4 to 8, 4 to 10-ish a day. Bearing in mind, we do 550 incidents a day.
Yeah.
So.
And if, going back to my initial question here, if we have a transport tied to that, that can pull an ambulance out of operation for how long? Or at hospital times on average?
So our call times now, depending on where we're at with hospitals, I mean, we're beginning to see some things trend up right now, our downtime while we wait at hospitals, but we could easily be an hour down with calls. We're seeing about 17 minutes right now, I think, average in our on-scene time of our medic units, which is amazing. That's very good time. On scene, engage a patient, get a history, treatment plan, and move. The back end is where we're starting to see that tick up a little bit, and I think that our extended hospital times become very, very synonymous with high call volume, right? And it just, once it just starts to really stack up on us. But generally, around an hour, about 17 minutes on scene, and then there's some back-end time that's a variable depending on what the hospital is.
Yeah, I don't know if this is available or what we can pull from the data we have available, but it'd be very interesting to me to see, for our given medical units, of which we are already short, how much of their time is responding exactly to, the opioid epidemic in all of its forms. Now, I know there are limitations. We track overdoses and people who respond to naloxone. That is probably our surest data point. There are, other related instances for which we can't definitively say so, but that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around. How big of a problem is this, and how much of our time and effort does it pull on us is what I'm going for.
The challenge, bearing in mind we started doing this many, many years ago, calls don't just come out as an opioid overdose. They come down as a person down, unknown, unconscious, and not breathing.
Yeah.
That's where we, over years of evolution, work towards people that respond to the administration of Narcan. That's the surest way that we know that somebody truly had taken an opioid and that the naloxone worked on that. So that's where we get the non-fatal overdose numbers from.
Okay. I'll leave that as it is and maybe ask for it as an official follow-up if we can get that noted down. We got that as an official follow-up? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chief, I had a quick question about service number 602, particularly the elimination of the one-time funding for the $2.4 million for the additional vehicles, equipment, and apparatus. How come you all removed that funding?
The last part of that, ma'am?
How come you all removed that funding, given that we have such serious issues with, yes?
So they don't remove the funding. They ask for the funding. I just want to
Yes.
be clear as to who because you said, why did he remove the funding? So this question's for the budget director. Or if you could take it from the top.
Yeah, no worries. But I'm gonna go back to you real quick. Thank you so much, Chair. I wanted to ask particularly about the state of the fire apparatus, and if you could just share some context. And then the question to Laura, why it was removed, that would be great. Thank you.
So we have a large number of fire apparatus on order right now, both fire suppression apparatus, support, and EMS. And I'll try to answer part of the question. So I believe part of 2.4 million was what was granted by the city council. It was enhanced last year, if I remember right, to help with apparatus. That in fact has been invested.
But do you all still need fire engines and apparatus currently?
Well, we're on a replacement plan. We will
You're on a
always,
replacement
we will
plan.
always be on a replacement cycle. The
Okay.
only way we're gonna be able to maintain, given the call volume, is to have a constant replacement cycle.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
And so, just to add on to the chief's comments, so as part of the deliberations around the fiscal 24 budget, the council adopted an amendment to the BOE recommended budget that had a series of reallocations in the budget. Part of those reallocations were appropriating $3 million within the fire department to provide additional funding to go above and beyond what is traditionally budgeted for additional apparatus and equipment purchases in fiscal 24. Those dollars show up in two services in the fire department's budget.
Okay.
Service 602, fire suppression, that's
Yes.
the 2.4 you're talking about. And then there was an additional about $600,000 in service 613, fire facility and maintenance.
Okay. So that was trying to see where that is going.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the intent of that amendment, with a number of other actions that were part of the amendment, was that those dollars would be one time for
Okay.
fiscal 24 to address, to provide an infusion, so additional pieces of equipment could be purchased in fiscal 24. So it was removed with the understanding that it was a one-time add in fiscal 24. What I'll note is that the fire department's budget in fire facilities and maintenance always includes funding to purchase equipment and apparatus. In fiscal 25, the total budget is just over $2.8 million.
Okay.
That includes general fund dollars and then a grant that we received, the AMIS grant.
Okay.
Now, that is new purchases. The fire department is also part of the master lease program.
Yes.
That's administered by DGS through the fleet program. Every year, the fire department also gets replacement assets through the master lease. And the funding, the master lease funding appears within the fire department's budget as part of their fleet payments.
Sure. Thank you. My next question had to do with fire code enforcement. So we know that there are serious issues with vacant homes, and particularly vacant homes that firefighters, they go in, they could collapse at any time. How are you all maintaining that level of service, or even increasing that level of service with the number of vacant homes that we have? I didn't see, the only reason why I asked that is because in Service 611, for fire code enforcement, it's a 232 reduction in sworn positions due to turnover. And so I'm wondering why we didn't backfill or at least initiate that recruitment on the back end with additional inspectors from the fire department and DHCD.
So on the first part with regard to vacant structures, the one thing the department's been very fortunate is we received a grant, a FEMA grant, a fire prevention grant. And what that's enabled us to do is to put 2 vehicles on the street, each with 2 people daily. It's on an overtime basis, so it's reimbursed by the grant. There are 2 missions to those vehicles. First and foremost is to seek out Codex buildings, dangerous vacant buildings. The second is to be able to absorb some of the 311 calls we get for smoke detector installation. So I'll start with Codex first. That program actually initiated in November of it started last November. It's grant funded. Total inspections just on that program alone, this is not field apparatus and what our normal fire force does, but total building inspections on that is over 4,900 or 5,900. They've identified 471 Codex buildings just out of those 2 vehicles alone. They've issued 326 violations. They've installed 648 the red diamond placards on the Codex buildings, and they've installed over 1,300 smoke alarms. So that's been an extraordinarily successful program that's run in addition to fire prevention, but I'll stop there for you.
And what is the intersection with those vacant buildings for like demolition costs? Like, are you all tagging those that have the kind of increased likelihood of just falling? Like, how are you all aligning with the demolition schedule?
I can't speak to how we align with the demolition schedule. What I can speak to is when these buildings are tagged, they're a no-go based on structural integrity, right? And during times of fire, severe weather, wind, heavy snow, that structural integrity is only going to be compromised even more. So I don't know how we align with regard to demolition itself. What I can tell you right now in CAD, we have over 5,800 Codex buildings that we have put into CAD ourselves.
I wonder if that can be a request from the administration to kind of look and see what that alignment is with those Codex buildings with the demolition schedule. Thank you.
Sure you got that? Why don't we just repeat it again,
Sure.
Councilwoman?
So I asked about the alignment of Codex buildings with the demolition schedule.
Chief, I understand that there's been a request made for battalion technician positions, which was something that was a recommendation in the Stricker report, and that request was declined. Can you talk about that? Or there was a request by fire for the fiscal 25 budget to include funding for those positions. Is that correct?
I believe we did have a request in there, yes, sir.
And that request,
Just to clarify, that request was submitted for the fiscal 24 budget.
not 25.
That's correct.
Is that fire's understanding?
I'd have to verify that
Who
with
is
our CFO. I'd have to
Who's the
verify
CFO?
that.
And we did, the fire department submitted a request as part of the fiscal 24 budget for a number of initiatives as a result of the Board of Inquiry report regarding the Stricker Street fire. Out of the requests that were included in that memo, the fiscal 24 budget funded 4 additional safety positions, and those positions continue to be funded in fiscal 25. But there were no other recommendations from that, no other requests from that memo last year included in the fiscal 25 recommendations beyond the 4 positions that were created last year.
So the 4 positions were originally funded in fiscal '24, and they continue to be funded
That's correct.
in '25. And the recommendation from the Stricker Street report was for 4?
I believe for the safety officers, and I can verify this for you, I believe the 4 was what was requested as part of the materials submitted for the fiscal '24 budget process.
Okay, and can you come on up, please? And state your name.
Jim Fisher, Baltimore City Fire Department Finance Officer. In the Stricker Street Fire report also, there were some officers that were going to be battalion chief aides. Battalion chief aides,
Walk me, what is that?
chief.
I mean, I think I know, but.
So I think you're talking about the same position, battalion techs, battalion chief aides. They're currently acting as a driver for the chief. They also assist the chief just with day-to-day operations. However, and most significantly, they are the extra sets of eyes and ears on the fire ground. One of them functions primarily as an accountability officer. So that's for fire ground tracking. Anyone who walks on a fire ground, we're responsible for, whether it be our people, police, news media, civilians. We bear ultimate responsibility for safety on that fire ground. So it's that person's responsibility to track that, but most importantly, to track the positions of our people inside of burning buildings.
Got it. So, I apologize for, back to what you were saying. So there were more positions that were not funded, or more positions recommended?
They were recommended by the Stricker Street report. We did put in to request funding for those, but the funding wasn't available in '24. We've discussed it with.
Pause real quick. How many of those positions, and what, were those also battalion?
Well, there's 1 for each battalion plus 1 for the EMS battalion chief.
And there's 7 battalions, 6?
7 times 4 is 28.
The request was for 28 battalion technician positions.
So what, the original 4 were separate from the 28?
So the request included multiple striker there were 6 requests as part of the Stricker Street Board of Inquiry response. Only 1 of them was funded in fiscal '24. And that was the safety positions. The battalion technician program was not recommended for funding in fiscal '24.
Okay, and then in '25, of those 6 recommendations, or 6 requests,
Yep.
6 items, let's call them, from the Stricker Street report, the only one that continues to be funded is the 4 battalion chief
Correct.
aides. And you all put in a request again this year?
I believe we did, but I could go back and double
Defer to
check.
Laura, yeah, okay.
I know because it wasn't funded in '24, we would have again requested it for '25
And
with funding availability, so.
yep. Jim and I can
Yeah.
follow up and verify what was requested as part of the '25 process as a follow-up.
Okay.
Okay.
So do we have like a 1-page summary that exists which shows the recommendations and the extent to which those recommendations have been implemented as a result of that report?
We could
provide
put
it.
that together very easily for you.
How soon could you guys get that to us?
We could provide that, would it be reasonable if we had until the end of the week? The
End of
the-
this week?
Yeah,
Like tomorrow?
or next week. Would it be
That's why I
possible
asked this week,
would it be
Laura.
possible if we had a week to satisfy that request?
Yeah, so
we'll go back
could we say by end of the day next Thursday? Is
That would be feasible, yes.
That works for us.
That's
Great.
fine.
All right, thank you all very much.
Okay.
Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was one of my questions, so I'm glad that we were able to get that through. And I'm assuming the SOC positions also were part of that request, so I'll defer to that as well. Chief, in your quarter four reporting, I think the reporting to the Public Safety Committee is always very detailed, which I definitely appreciate. The quarter four meeting, I wasn't there, so I wanted to just ask this question. You had put in a slide in some of the other reports about injuries that happened in vacant and abandoned properties. So in slide 22 of that particular report of the slides that you gave to the committee, it looks like a third of the fires that took place that quarter were vacant or they were Codex houses. And I use or because sometimes it's and sometimes it's or, right? Sometimes there's overlap there. And so that's actually a pretty significant amount. And then we had a slide at one other point for reporting that talked about the injuries that have been occurring, and that was not in the Q4 report. Can we get that data? So specifically, I guess, Madam Chair, where I'm looking for the quarter four 2023, and I guess we might as well do quarter one 2024 since we're about to report on it. The number of injuries to firefighters with dealing with vacant and abandoned properties.
Yes, we can provide that. Do you just want a number? Do you want type? How
The
granular?
slide that you did for us for Q3, just keep doing that slide for every quarter.
Okay.
So if you can give me Q4, and then when we report on Q1 at our committee, just include that in the report.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that sound good? Okay.
Did you get that request? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then I have a question about the permit office, anticipated, I think, that we're going to hear from DHCD later, but they're going through a full-on reform of the permit office. And so I'm curious to know specifically how the Fire Marshal's office is participating in that reform process, and specifically trying to get some of these numbers down in terms of right now, one of the outcomes is that you have the plans reviewed within 30 days. Is there, with this new system and the new plan, are you going to reduce that number? Those kinds of things. Because I'm also seeing that there's reductions in funding and positions in your office, which I think would be something to be concerned about. Bring it down. There you go.
Yes, the Office of the Fire Marshal participates in these meetings on a weekly basis. We've been intimately involved. It's anticipated that the new permit system will be a one permit system, meaning if you need a permit for DHCD, DOT, fire, or anything, you'll be able to go there. All your permit fees will be paid online. It's anticipated that any type of information that you need, you will also be able to get that data as well. It's anticipated that this new permitting system will go live January 1st of this year. We began our beta testing June the 1st. It will be doing live testing internal October the 1st, and then the whole system goes live again in January the 1st. So far as the plan reviewer position that you referenced, we're currently hiring. It's anticipated we'll have a candidate on board, within the next couple weeks or so. We do have 2 vacancies, but we have a promotional test coming up, so that should be filled as well to make the whole process better.
So in the budget book, and what we heard from the city administrator the other day was that the permit office reforms aren't going live until later in 2025. And later in 2025, third quarter. And we're going to dig into that later on this evening with DHCD. But that is a challenge if things are moving forward and not all of the parties are brought in on the timeline. So I will just state that. But there was also just there was a reduction in funding in your office. And so I think that it was, it might have been one of the accounting issues.
Councilwoman, can you point me to which service you're referencing?
Looking at the fire marshal.
Yes, so you're looking at Service 611 Fire Code Enforcement?
Yes, ma'am.
The reduction in funding there is partially driven by the change in how we're budgeting grants.
Okay.
So there were 2 grant awards that are not anticipated to be received in fiscal 25. So that accounts for, on the federal side, $171,000 of the reduction, and then on the state side, $195,000 of the reduction. If you flip to page 142 of volume 1 of the agency detail, you can see the change table that reflects the general fund modifications that were made to the budget. Most of these modifications are just related to recalibrating the personnel budget based off of the current roster.
Got it. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll yield for my next round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we get an update on the public safety apprenticeship program implementation?
Yes, sir. So we have, it's actually in Workday right now. We have, I believe, and I have HR people here who can dive into it with a little more specificity. I believe we have somewhere around 36 people that have actually signed up to through Workday, through the city's job site. The challenge that we've had, at least with maintaining consistency, has just been with personnel that we can dedicate to it, when a lot of the personnel that are involved in the recruitment and onboarding are also involved in recruitment and onboarding of first responder staffing, right, to try to alleviate that. So there's a staffing kind of initiative there with regard to that program itself. And then, of course, there's a the bigger problem with staffing the department. But I have HR is Cherie, if you could step up real quick and just update on that, please. She went to the bathroom. Okay. Councilman, she's in the restroom right now.
Yeah, if she has more to add, she would.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The second question I had was around human trafficking. We continue to praise Lieutenant Law and her work that she's been doing in training fire, EMS, and just being a real champion for the work. Has there, again, just been any consideration, I know this is the last budget, and kind of looking at you and the budget director, to think about making that just a permanent position in the fire department? I mean, we've had conversations about cases that EMS staff and fire staff have been integral in, and I just think it's something that, you all are really on the front lines, transporting patients to the hospitals. Obviously, we've done a lot of work with the hospital system, led by Mercy, and their Blue Dot work there. So I just think that this is something that really should sit with the fire department. And any consideration there, I know that everybody's been asked to tighten their belts, but I just let you respond on that.
Yeah, and thank you for that, and also thank you for recognizing that. I would love to have it. I would love to have that position. I would love to have Lieutenant Law really spearhead that moving forward. I just need to get the staffing problem, and literally an EMS lieutenant, the value of an EMS officer right now is very high. We as a department have been very successful in intervening, and we've had conversations really very, very recently in a very significant case of suspected human trafficking. It's a result of her training, in which she's been able to deliver to our field force personnel. And that particular incident, they spotted it right away. It was textbook. She became involved, as well as other resources, and things move forward on that. But if I had the position to spare right now, absolutely, I would do it. I just don't have it at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got here a little bit late. Chief, this is your first or second budget cycle?
As chief of the fire department first.
That's what I thought.
3 as OEM.
Yes, all right. Well, you've probably heard me ask this before, but never as chief, so I'll ask it again and see where it gets me this year. How many take-home vehicles does the department have assigned to personnel?
32.
And how many?
32.
And how many of them are taken home outside of the city of Baltimore every day?
I can total that up for you, Councilman. It's probably consistent with numbers you've had over the past several years, minus me. But yeah, I'd have to total that up for you, and I'm certainly willing to do that. I have it here somewhere in this book.
I'm still trying to get to the bottom of this idea that somehow this is critical that we give people take-home vehicles just to be able to drive back and forth to work is common for all of us every day. I mean, the vast majority of the workforce in the world does not have a vehicle provided to them by their employer just for primarily for the purpose of just getting to and from work. And we know that giving people easier means to drive long distances incentivizes them to drive long distances instead of live closer to their work. And it just doesn't it's nonsensical to me to have people drive assigned vehicles to drive long distances to and from their job here when that's just not normal by any other standard. Let me see if I can think of the question here. I'm going to follow up with you because we haven't had this conversation. I've had this conversation with the previous chief, and it was like falling on deaf ears. And I think that you're a lot different than the previous chief, and I hope that we can have a constructive conversation about this. I'm happy that you have that first line of numbers available offhand. I don't want to take up budget time with this. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Now been joined by Councilman Isaac Gitzi Schleifer, 5th District member of the committee. Schleifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Fire Chief, to you and your entire team for all the great work you guys have been doing. I was just out there on the street with some of your team yesterday for a fire in my district. They made it there very quickly, so even the executive team was out there in, what was that, under 5 minutes? Yes, pretty impressive. So just on that same note about the take-home cars, if you could, when you pull up that data, if you can see, are any of these employees, are these 9 to 5 employees that just work at a desk, or are these people who are required to come in 24/7 for an event of emergency?
So the way that we want our vehicles distributed are those that are needed during times of emergency. I'll use the power outage several months ago that occurred downtown. We had the Vault fire. Initially, we were down there. Chief Stewart and myself were down there. As power went out, downtown went dark. I needed to start bringing my command staff back in to start fulfilling certain roles in the ICS structure. When we respond to emergency incidents, whether it's a vehicle accident or it's something as significant as a Key Bridge incident, that incident often becomes very dynamic and very scalar. We oftentimes hear that emergencies start at the local level, they move up through, they move up to the federal level, but ultimately down. We operate in the same manner internally. Many of our incidents are handled initially at the battalion chief level. As the incident begins to grow, the shift commander goes out. If the shift commander has to take command of the incident, I need command level staff to come back in and assume responsibility for the city, for the remainder of the city. I also need staff to come in to assist the shift commander. If that incident grows beyond the control of a shift commander, and we'll have Chief Stewart, Chief Matz, one of my executive chiefs, will assume command of that role. All along, moving those subordinate chiefs closer to the incident itself. That's the way the fire department works. That's how we do it. We scale up with the incident, we scale back down. Unfortunately, these incidents don't happen at our convenience. A lot of my command staff that's behind me here today, they do work 9 to 5 jobs, but they play integral roles outside of the office. They're the ones calling the shots when things really go sideways on us out here. So that is how I would speak to the need for those resources to be available to us. You know, when we're officers, we're not officers when we feel like being or when it's convenient for us. We're officers at all times, and I fully expect my command staff to act that way and to respond to these calls, but we have to provide the means by which they can provide that service.
Sounds good. All right, thank you.
Councilman Dorsey has a follow-up on that.
Thank you. I do want to ask if you can account for the mileage traveled for emergency response versus mileage traveled for non-emergency routine usage.
For me personally,
No, for all the take-home vehicles.
we can, I mean, we can bring that data to you if you like.
I'd like-
I mean, I can't, as I'm sitting here,
No, I
obviously,
understand.
yeah.
This is a request of the committee, then, if we can take this down.
Sure.
I'd
Yes,
like-
sir.
I'd like an account of the mileage traveled for all the department's take-home vehicles separated into emergency versus non-routine usage.
Conway?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to circle back to the line of questionings I had around opioids. I wanted you to give us a little bit of insight because we had some discussion in our last oversight hearing with the fire department about harm reduction programs being operated out of the agency. Can you tell us a little bit about those programs and even more how that's covered in this budget, whether they're expansions? That would be helpful.
Thank you for that question, Councilman Conway. Just take one quick step back. My number was actually accurate. I found out last month in April, we had 147 overdoses total, which is 4.7 a day. So that's about the right number. But we tracked the data extremely close. So we were really lucky. The Population Health Initiative was funded through the ESPP program. It actually initiated on July 11th of 23. They've done outstanding work. It's been a team of outreach paramedics as well as lieutenants. I think the last time we had the quarterly meeting, I shared the video where they were actually out on the street doing their work. That program has been in inception for, as of this report, 211 days. They've actually touched over 8,000 patients in 1 year, almost 1 year. So that's a lot. That's patients and bystanders. That's where they do a lot of their work. In addition to that, they also are starting to work around our high utilizers. And to date, they were able to resolve actually 24 of those high utilizers. And we could talk about that later if you want to, but the high utilizers take a significant amount of low acuity or low priority response. In addition, the program also assists the health department. We've done vaccinations. They did 1,148 vaccinations to our vulnerable and homebound personnel in the city. As I explained earlier, the state of Maryland requires us to do public health education along with whenever we distribute Narcan or naloxone. They've actually, in the time they've been in operation, had 1,063 awareness events that totaled 10,273 minutes or 171 hours. In addition to that, they also track our vulnerable adult and children population. They're doing a really good job of that. Unfortunately, those numbers are quite high. In the last year, they've tracked 148 adults as well as 83 children that were at risk that they report through DSS and Child Protective Services. And then also they distribute Leave Behind Narcan. Prior to that program being in effect from 2018 through 2023 when they started, they had only left behind 2,531 kids. Since that program was in operation and as of last week, they had left behind 7,999 Leave Behind kits, or just under 16,000 doses of Narcan. They're making a significant impact on the street. One of the things I had explained earlier is we're just getting enough data to start to analyze it. What we're finding in a quarter-mile circumference of where we leave behind Narcan, 30 days before and 30 days after the leave behind, we're documenting seeing approximately 28% reduction in opioid calls. That's why a lot of these calls are starting to go down. Citywide, on that same period, we're seeing an 18% reduction. So they're doing really some really good work. And then finally, one of the things the crew do when they leave behind, they're leaving behind things like food and water. They're doing some fentanyl test strips. What they do is they leave behind the kits in like a brown lunch bag. So there's no stigma with it. It has some resources, some services. One of the more important things, and I just talked to Chief Cullen about this yesterday, people that want treatment, they have to want treatment. What that team's able to do is to get on the street and they build a rapport and a relationship with these people. So when they're ready to transition to treatment, we're there to be able to take them to that. So.
Very helpful, and I want to say I'm really proud of the work that you guys have done, especially in that program and that pilot. I know it's something we've been talking about probably for the last 3 years, and in the last year we've been able to get that off the ground and show some real returns. I can't remember the number that you explained in the last hearing. There was, after you put out the Narcan within the communities that we saw those in, we saw a decline in overdoses in those areas. Do you remember what?
A 28% reduction in that quarter-mile circle. You remember those people travel by feet. So what we did is we narrowed it down to a quarter-mile circumference. 30 days before and 30 days after, we're finding a 28% reduction in opioid calls. That doesn't mean they're not going on. It just means they're not calling us to those because of the distribution of the Narcan on the street.
Very helpful. How much did that pilot cost us?
I'm going to have to pull those numbers for you right now, but it was part of the ESPP funding that we were to realize in FY23. There's several positions as well as additional things. One of the other things that we were able to do with that.
I have the population health program in fiscal 25 is budgeted at just over $1 million, and then the 911 nurse triage program is budgeted at $1.2 million in fiscal 25.
And that's just to maintain the level of service that we've had over the last year.
That's correct. Both programs were funded in fiscal 24, and so there are, both of the budgets have been adjusted to include inflationary increases to maintain the current level of service.
Yeah, I think given the level of success, I think it's worth having a conversation to see if we can maybe expand that program. I certainly have a desire to do that, and I'm willing to have a further conversation. But knowing that we're having some success with these efforts, as we start to think about ways to really begin to tackle the opioid epidemic here in the city, really glad to hear this is working. Really glad to hear it costs us $1 million bucks, and maybe we can consider finding some more additional funding for it. But thank you. The other question I have is not related to opioids. I'll shift over to general operations. Chief Wallace, how many vacancies do we have across the fire department right now?
As of right before I walked over here, our uniform staff, I believe, was 167. So that's our actual uniform, 160, somewhere right in that 170 area.
And in this budget, how have we made any investments or changes in our recruiting and retention efforts that'll help us with that vacancy number?
So we've had the bonus offerings that we feel have been successful, at least for the EMTs. That's where we've really focused that a lot. We're really trying to build up our EMS force. The other thing that we're working on right now is a contractual agreement with an outside testing group, which they'll actually deliver a written test for us at various test centers. And this is not limited to the city of Baltimore. They'll do it nationally. As we've worked through the negotiation with them, naturally we have a focus locally, right, on making it available to city residents. And I'm working with Commissioner Worley. We're going to actually be using their test center at BPD to offer this test. In addition to that, what will happen is once that test is given, they will aggregate a list of those who have successfully passed only the written portion. So from that point, when we're ready to pull a list of candidates, it's going to be prospective candidates that have passed the written piece. What we're going to do is we're going to compress at that point the PAT testing at the Fire Academy and the interview process. We're going to attempt to compress that into one day. Behind that, what we hope to be able to do, if they successfully complete PAT, they successfully complete an interview, we hope to have a list of dates from the public safety infirmary where the physicals can occur. In a perfect world, we have those lists that day. Candidate comes through, they pass everything. Hey, here's your appointment date. You're moving on to the next step. They finish that. It's a background check, and we're ready to go. So we've kind of gone outside the box with this. Really, we're all over the city at different events, right? I've been out there myself. I think it's working, but this is the next, I think, phase in a further reaching strategy for us. Finally, what I'll add is the company that we want to contract with, they're very aggressive in social media marketing, so they can really reach far and wide to attract potential candidates.
So what I'm hearing is our strategy is we're not looking for any additional money in this budget. We're not expecting any additional money in this budget, but we're looking at improving and streamlining the process in order to make it a shorter.
Yeah, I think we can improve. Okay. Again, I just want to be more innovative, more outside of the box with this. What we're doing with regard to the bonuses, I think work. The signing bonuses, I think it works, right? They're paid out in phases, and I believe that works. But I also believe if we can get this company to work with us and program what we want to do the way we want to do it, I'm very optimistic we can be successful with this. At least begin to raise those numbers up.
Good. Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Porter, and can you go back to your initial request, or the request that you made last round, because I believe Fire may be in a position to answer that.
Oh, good. Thank you.
But if you can repeat it, please.
I don't remember.
Try it, right?
Codex building and demolition schedule, yes. Yes, so I asked about the alignment of your Codex building and the demolition schedule. So the Codex houses that are to be demolished, do you have that alignment?
Chief, we don't know what the alignment, excuse me.
Physically pull the whole thing closer to your face.
Oh, yeah.
Good morning. How's everyone today?
Good.
Just like to speak on that question in reference to the demolition. So what we don't do, we don't line up with the demolition schedule. Our men and women go out every Wednesday and then every day with the SSU unit, and they forward into a code violation into DHCD. So once DHCD gets those code violations, they process them as they see fit, but we're acting independently to make sure we're ahead of that curve.
Okay. Thank you for that response. I don't know if I would like to see more alignment with the demolition schedule. There are a few houses currently in District 10 and District 9, Councilman Bullock's district, that should be set for demolition, and they've been entered as Codex for a little while now.
Yeah, we'll definitely have a conversation with DHCD, understanding that their process sometimes doesn't line up with our process or schedule, but we're definitely open to that conversation.
Okay, and I wonder if it can be a leadership conversation as well between the commissioner and the fire chief to really align that as well.
And I will say we do meet,
Thank you,
Commissioner
Mr.
Kenny
Kenny.
and I, so yeah, absolutely, we'll do that. We'll speak about that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Thank you. All right. I do. Service 612 fire investigation. One of the performance metrics has to do with the number of fire investigations where causation is determined annually. It's at 65%. Why isn't that not a little bit higher, closer to 90 or 100%?
So I'll start for Chief Eames. The one thing that, with regard to Codex, that becomes a challenge for us, cause determination in vacant dwellings where we don't allow our firefighters to attack on an interior type posture. We don't allow our fire investigators to go in there and attempt cause determination. It becomes a life safety issue as much for our arson investigators as it does our firefighters. So, oftentimes I think they can make some some preliminary determinations, right? There's no electric to the house, there's no gas service, there was no lighting in the area. You can begin to kind of draw down on that. I would say that to be one. The second thing is, we could have, as of the time that we reported some of these statistics out, we could still have open investigations where samples have been sent off to the state police lab or things have been sent off to the ATF. I think we may still have one open where we've sent some electrical items to the ATF for determination, but I'll stop there for Chief Eames to add.
Yes, to Chief Wallace's point, as we become more concerned with, with the safety of our firefighters, we no longer go into these vacant buildings. As you know, Baltimore City has hundreds and hundreds of vacant buildings, which leads us to not be able to accurately determine the cause and origin. That's why you see it going down and down and down. To his other point, the lab samples take about 4 months to get our answer back. So we may have multiple fires that we will have an answer to, but we won't get the answer to 4 or 5 months later. So that's the reason why that total is going down.
Are you all using any alternative technologies such as drone technologies to help out with this assessment?
We do not have a drone program yet inside the department. I think we could access and work with BPD I know they're getting a drone program up. Oftentimes the additional technology that's used, and it's very simple technology, is an accelerant dog. And we don't have an accelerant dog here. We have them around us. We have very, very good relationships with our mutual aid partners. However, a majority of the dog handlers will not allow their canine to enter into buildings that they wouldn't walk into themselves. So, the challenge becomes, occupied dwellings. We can work in occupied dwellings as long as they're not damaged to the extent at which there's imminent collapse. But when we start working with vacant dwellings, it becomes a challenge. And, we have to, as much with our fire investigators as we do everyone else, is just maintain that life safety aspect and, keep that in mind. These buildings will come down after we're gone, and we don't need to have active fire in a building for it to come down. So we're just trying to be extraordinarily careful, and even with EMS calls, and not to get off topic, but we have a procedure for dealing with Code X with EMS calls. We can't have our paramedics just going into a Code X or vacant building that's unsafe. We have to be strategic and think our way into that.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that as far as worker safety, but I'm looking at it from a community perspective. These buildings are existing in community for longer periods of time where they're not being demolished, they're existing, and so they present public safety hazards for community members as well. So that may be something we can kind of push a little bit more, just to think more creatively, how we can address that issue moving forward.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we, as a committee request, could we get the list of Codex properties that you've already coded? And then can we get because you keep doing it every Wednesday, I'd love the update every quarter when you add. Just want to make sure that was recorded, Mr. Chair. Just to get the list of the Codex properties by address, and then update it every quarter. That would be super. Thank you so much. Because as you know, I do an analysis in my district and a lot of other places to try to figure out, our best strategies for addressing vacant properties. So I'd love to have that list as well. I wanted to go to a similar line of questioning as my colleague from the 10th relative to the fire inspection reports. Chief, as you know, we've had a few fires in my district where I've asked for the fire report to take a look at, and these were not vacants. These were occupied homes. And I just want to make sure that the quality of the reports are going to be better. But also, in a couple of them, there was also not causation. Some of them were and some of them weren't. So I'm curious about there's always a lot of question from the community and everything else around, and insurance companies and all of that as to what the cause of a fire might be. And so I'm just curious, with those that are occupied, how are we trying to make sure that we're finding causation? I mean, it's not just for criminal activity, it's just like also for information about how something might have caused the fire. We would need that. So if you could talk a little bit about those, and then also just making sure that the quality of the report is going to be top-notch as well.
So regarding the quality of the report, I believe you're talking about the Union Avenue
The
incident.
Union and 28th Street and a couple others.
Yeah, so that was a first draft that had not gone through an administrative review process. By the time it gets to be a final report, all the errors are out of it. In order to expedite the claim process, the insurance person got a first draft report. There was no major content errors. It was just, some
There was one big one.
grammatical, but that's the answer for that report. Regarding the causation, we have all of our fire investigators had numerous years in, so to the extent possible, we will have an origin of cause. But if we can't more than 60% determine the exact cause of the fire, we won't say it. We don't want to give you an electrical fire when it's not. So all the reports that have an actual cause that that investigator can go to court and beyond a reasonable shadow of a doubt say that this is the cause of the fire. If they can't do that, then they won't put them a
So
card.
60% is the threshold, so if it's more than 60%?
That's about the national average. It really is.
That if your investigator says, I'm almost positive,
That
then
that's
we'll
the
do that,
cause.
but if I'm not so sure yet, then we'll,
Yes,
I guess that's the question that I had.
Yes, so if they can't almost be 100% sure that that's the case, but the national average for solving a origin of cause is about 60%.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On this question of arsons, how many, if you don't have this in front of you, we can submit it as a report, or agency request, I'm sorry. How many fires were designated as arson in the last year?
Unfortunately, I don't have that number in front of me, but I can definitely get that for you. But thus far, we've done 490 investigations this year, so I can definitely get you the number that's actually arsons.
And just as a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair, we passed a arson registry, which should have gone into effect last year. Now, obviously, BPD's the one that's primarily responsible for maintaining that registry, but is your office working with them and sort of collaborating and maintaining that database in any
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question, Councilperson.
So we passed the creation of an arson registry.
Yes.
Is your office, do you work in tandem with the police department in maintaining that?
Yes. Okay. So we created what's called the Joint Fire Investigation Task Force. We actually meet and work with them daily so we can attempt to, solve cases better. We actually made several arrests in a recent past about people who had that type of history.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Dorsey? I'm good, thank you.
Thank you all for the work that you continue to do for our city. I'd first of all like to thank you all, especially Chief Ames, for agreeing with that amendment for the senior buildings, adding or in that code for doing at least 3 fire drills in senior buildings, whether they're city-owned or privately owned, and the having the landlord devise a plan of action. I think because those buildings have a turnover that a lot of times they're confused of how to do, what to do. A number of them are in wheelchairs, and of course, as I mentioned, the turnover when they eventually leave this earth, it's just new people come in, and it's not a succession of how to leave those buildings safety when there's danger in those buildings. So I appreciate that, and I think that's going to be a very good impact as we move forward. And then I guess just one question. I guess this piggybacks on what my colleagues have mentioned about vacant homes and demolition process, and we know all of that really starts with housing. And I guess I just want to know, does housing respond to you in a timely manner with these things? Because that's just crucial with all of, all of the vacants, all of these buildings or these individual homes, especially the ones that have the red signs on them. There's vacant homes where we have drug dealers that take over because of a death of a family member and things haven't been caught up with that piece of property. Do you, what, can you explain just briefly that communication process?
So at a high level, the initial communications process with location of vacants, locations of codex, that will go back and forth through the city's CAD team. So when DHCD finds a vacant or they find several vacants, they will send that over to the CAD team. That comes to my team, that's put into our CAD. The inverse happens as well. So there's information sharing in regard to vacants across both agencies. That also applies to Codex. So when we find Code X-ray buildings, we send that over to them. Naturally, they are placarded, and it was DHCD does what they do in the neighborhoods. They can see where we've been as well. They see those placards. When our personnel find vacant dwellings in the field that are being occupied for illegally, for whatever reason, they report that through the battalion chief, through the shift commander's office, up through the assistant chief of operations, and that goes over to DHCD as well. I can tell you oftentimes I'll hear, I listen to our radio all hours of the night, and I'll hear our people at a vacant dwelling or a code X-ray dwelling, and they're calling out their occupants inside. So I'll quick send a message over to Director Kennedy, keeping it at our level, and they address it. Finally, I'll say that we're working to build a database internally so that we can actually track where we're encountering homeless in vacant dwellings a little bit better. I spoke earlier about the EMS calls. We find people in code X-ray buildings enough that it's concerning. When we as a fire department take a posture that we're not going to send our people into code X-ray buildings, and then we find people in buildings, that's the delicacy of this job. It's extraordinarily difficult for our people to make a no-go situation. However, in those cases where it's not that severe, where lives aren't at risk, but we need to get in and mitigate that problem, we're going to build our own database that's interactive with DHCD so we can be more real time, right? That middle of the night email that I send to Commissioner Kennedy, she's not going to see it till the next morning, right? But in our world, we need to have that dealt with right away. That's got to be, dealt with real quick. So, what I would say is there's communications there. There's communications at multiple levels there. I think there's internal processes that involve several agencies that ultimately kind of culminate at the top. And Chief Stewart runs ours internal. I don't know if you want to add anything that I may have missed.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Pretty much on Wednesdays, we'll have units canvass certain districts for looking for new code X-rays, and we'll actually reach out to DHCD, the inspection section, and they will send inspectors out with us, with our units, and we'll actually walk through those areas together. And if it's a situation where they have to do other duties and they can't go with us, they'll actually go out a day or two before and check those same addresses, forward us the information that they have, and we'll pretty much go up, follow up with what they sent us, and get our own information as well. So thank you for that question. I would say that us actually going out together and interacting, they're getting to know our members are knowing them. I think it's 4 inspectors that come out. So just that interaction in person, I think due to the time-sensitive nature of this, just actually getting out and getting out in the street is more effective as opposed to sitting in a classroom and talking about what we already know. So, yes, ma'am.
I did have a question about 911 callers dispatched. There were a continuous announcement for 14 911 call dispatchers, I believe, last year. How many of those have been fulfilled?
So I'll start. Right now, I believe she has 18 vacancies in the call center, but 36 that are going through the interview process now, but I'll defer back over to the director as well. She can.
Okay.
So as of right now, I do have 18 vacancies. We participated in the Baltimore hiring event, and we also participated in the open interview 2 weeks ago. And out of that, we had 36 candidates who came in for the interview. And we had 13 candidates who came in for the interview process, along with another, I think we did like 20-something interviews prior to that in April. So as of right now, last conversation with HR was yesterday. We expecting a class to start June the 17th. We're still waiting for the background investigation to be done to get the final count of how many people coming through. But they actually, I think 13 people, 16 people that they put through the background process.
Okay, so with these additional 16, you should have a full staff?
Yes.
Okay.
Close to it.
Well, close to it, yes, close to it, yes.
Close to it, yes.
Secondarily, I wanted to ask about the facilities of 911. What is happening there? That's my first question. And how can we begin to get better facilities for our 911 call dispatchers?
So I'm not aware of anything happening inside of the facility right now. I think I would have to defer that probably to Director Garbark with regard to some potential future plans there. But currently, right now, I'm not aware of anything ongoing inside of the 911 center.
Is that based on your visit last? Okay, I thought so. Being as though, we actually in another agency's building, we're in Baltimore Police Department's building. When it comes down to the facilities, everything has to be handled through facilities there. So if anything needs to be done, handled, fixed, we have to go there, or we have, like he said, he would probably have to reach out to someone else, especially from DGS. But because that's their building, they have to normally coordinate with the facilities.
So let me better rephrase my question. Will there be a separate facility for 911 call dispatchers outside of the Baltimore City Police Department?
I'm not aware of any moves right now in the immediate future.
Okay.
That's where we're working at right now.
Okay. Just seems a little cramped, so that's why I'm asking. We have a lot of city-owned buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Along the same line of questioning, how many of those recruits speak Spanish?
You talking about the ones that's actually in the background process? I'm not sure exactly how many, but we're not only worried about Spanish speaking, we're worried about any non-English speaking ones that can interpret. Like I said, we have a growing community in the city of Baltimore, so we do have a large number that do speak Spanish, but we also growing with non-English speaker. I can't give that number right now because I haven't actually looked at it, but HR maybe, do you know exactly? Okay, they haven't checked the demographics behind it, but even when it comes down to the recruitment, I've reached out to Mina with their recruitment strategies, but then also as specifying that we do need people that speaks non-English languages.
Can I also ask that as a committee request, in terms of the number of the people that you're working with now that speak Spanish, and then those that might speak another language? And then how many of the 911 operators speak Spanish?
As of right now, we have two that
Well,
speak.
it's a 100% increase from last year. Yeah, and I know you're working on the text and, you know, the AI technology that you have, which I think is fine. I do still think that, you know, the frontline people who are speaking with our residents, it's extremely important to have more of them. So there's, you know, please send me any of the job descriptions or whatever to be able to make sure that we're recruiting. And I think I've sent you a couple of people too. So hopefully they've made it through the process.
And to those candidates, we reached out for the last interview process, the last two interview processes. I'm not sure if they actually came to it, but we did the open interview process. And even when it comes down to recruitment, this is something that I've spoken to Chief Wallace and he's given me the okay. So we're gonna do a prospect day moving forward with that is one day where we're doing everything that particular day, from actually coming in, visiting the 911 center so they can actually see what the job entails, to the actual pre-test, to interviews, then leaving with a soft offer letter based contingent to the background and physical examination so that we can pull better demographics. But then also 911 is open, currently open. So if you want me to send you that link, I have no problem with it. And you can actually
Okay,
and
that's
we're
great.
looking to possibly overfill. So even though we have 18 vacancies, we're looking to overfill. So 18 is my number that I have vacant, so I'm going as high as 20-something to try to pull in.
Yep, okay, great. Yeah, send us when that prospect day is gonna be. That'll be amazing. And then, Chief, you and I were together with a few other of our colleagues right after the Lombard Street fire and, or I guess that weekend. And it was a very good initiative because we were able to work with basically the entire block of residents that needed fire, you know, smoke alarms. And literally every single house we went to, they needed them. But the key to the success that day were the volunteer translators, right? So what is the plan moving forward with the fire department doing all of these outreach events to try to get more smoke alarms and other things, to make sure that you've got people who speak the other languages that are in the neighborhood with you, so that there's somebody that they trust that's able to translate for your department and also for the family.
Right, and thank you for that, and certainly thank you for your help that weekend. That was an amazing event. Unfortunately, it happened because of a tragic event, right? So what we've done recently, we actually just published this, it was either the beginning of this week or the end of last week. We've actually worked with Mima, with Catalina and her team. We've made a determination of the top 5 languages in the city of Baltimore. We have taken our smoke alarm forms and we have had those translated now into those top 5 languages. That information's been put into BCFD forms, which all of our personnel can access. We rely heavily on our company officers to know their districts, right? So if they're heading out and they have a specific language in a particular district, then they're to take those forms with them. I think ultimately, in order to be able to be successful boots on the ground, 2 things have to happen if we're going to continue to canvass the neighborhoods successfully, but in different languages. One, our personnel need to continue to interact with their neighborhoods and get to really know their neighborhoods, right? You know how it is with 31. They know that neighborhood up there. They know where certain people are. And then 2, by building those bridges and making those bonds, inviting those people from the community to come with us. I think what we did on Lombard Street, we had a lot of community people there. The Red Cross was very instrumental in assisting us with translators. And I totally agree with you. Some of the houses we were at, we would not have gotten in had we not had local residents with us. So I think those are the two key factors. I think as an agency, we're developing the forms in different languages the way we should be. We have over 20 additional forms that have messaging, safety messaging, weather safety messaging. But where we've run into a bit of a roadblock is getting those forms translated into these other languages and then republished, right? Because they're FEMA forms, some people don't want to republish in different languages and things like that. So it's all really started with my executive assistant and chief of staff. They're doing a great job pushing it and working with Catalina and her team. And I think we have clear vision of what we need to do. We're moving through that process.
Well, I would also suggest, I mean, the people that were there that day were also Hispanic Commission members translating. And so when you've got, you're going to do an operation on a block and there's, people that that are speaking other languages, I think it's just important to reach out to MEMA as well, and also, reach out to, as you said, some community members that you may already know that are there, but and I know we're asking a lot of MEMA, but I think it's really important that we have people there. So hopefully that the people that are doing the outreach are making sure, and the officers are making sure that they can communicate with the residents, because that was the key to success that day, no question about it. So hopefully you can have more of those conversations with MEMA. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I don't have it in the agency readily available to me that I'm aware of.
Did you?
I'm good, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, Chief, to you and your team, thank you all very much. We are now in recess until 6 p.m. Live Baltimore and DHCD. Thank you.